Being intentional about every single action that you take is a habit. It's a habit that you have to develop. Um, a lot of people will go to meetups, they'll go to conferences, they will find other ways of doing stuff. They'll build websites, they will attend podcasts, they will start a podcast. What I find is that people spend so much time doing activities like, podcasts or going to conferences, that they forget that the most important reason that they're doing this, especially if they're raising capital, is to truly take the steps to raise capital. So what people do is they confuse the act of going to a meetup or going to a conference with the act of raising money. The truth actually is that all of these activities, and I could name another dozen activities, like writing a book, all of these activities are prerequisites for the act of raising money. There are things you need to do. There are things you need to have. None of them are actually ever going to raise money for you. So what people forget to do, they're not intentional about this, is that, okay, I'm going to a specific event, or I'm designing a business card, or I'm designing a brochure. How exactly am I going to go about the process of getting this in front of people? How exactly am I going to capture those people, right? Capture their information. And then most importantly, how am I going to build credibility with them? Be intentional about the process of raising money when it comes to every single activity that you do. And as I give you examples, it'll really start to click in. You always wanted to say that projects are the big problem, not equity. But even having said that, the truth is that there are times when you have too many projects and too little equity. And I never wanted to deal with that problem. I wanted to have this ever-present problem of 100% of the time, 365 days a year, I have too much equity, right? And I feel the burden of that, and that helps me take actions towards, finding projects or building projects. As you know, our company has two divisions, and we just last week opened a third division. So our first division is value add, and most of that is multifamily, though we do student housing and self-storage as well. The second division is new construction, and we've actually done more new construction in a COVID year than we would normally do in a regular year. And so we've done new construction of just most kind of assets you can think of, even like industrial assets. And then our third division is land development, because we find that the greatest value of all is in developing land. And so we've now built that third division. And so the reason we've had to build three divisions is to feed this massive equity pipeline that we've created. And all of that came from being intentional. So I'm happy to give you examples of what that means for people that don't have a $300 million portfolio. I'm going to show you, and some of you will see this, because this goes on YouTube. Oh, actually, it doesn't show that well. There we go. So this is just a simple business card. This is our business card. And I want to show you examples of this. And don't worry, if you can't see it, if you're just listening, don't worry. This will come across. So intention or building a brand that people like is part of every activity that you take. So I want you to basically change your mindset. So take a look at this card. And so I'm holding up my business card. So here's a few things that I want to point out. Number one, people think that because you're handling people's money, your logo has to be very looks like, it's something from 100 years ago, or something that's, that's very old fashioned, old style, stuffy banker style. I always found that to be a nonsensical idea, but it's very common. People, will create these kinds of connections. So the first thing that I wanted to do was differentiation. So you look at the logo of our company, and there's bright yellow and bright blue and bright purple in it, right? So I'm creating a differentiation, and I'm creating memory. When I create business cards, everybody's business cards, or most people's business cards, are horizontal, right? So they're horizontal cards. So guess what I do? I create vertical cards. Why? Differentiation. Everyone's cards, or most people's cards, have sharp edges, right? So they have sharp edges. So I create cards that have rounded edges, right? And most people will say, well, this is a business card. Its function is to simply give people's information. No, it's not. When I hand out a business card, and I hand out thousands of business cards in a non-COVID year, I never hand out the business card on the side that actually has the phone number and the email address. I hand it out on the other side, which states what we do, brags a little bit about us, and actually has a call to action for everyone. And they're like, so you build business cards for events? Yes. I spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to fly out to events to teach there, right? Or to just attend them. Sometimes I'm not teaching. And if I can spend thousands of dollars at each event, wouldn't it be useful to have spent $25 on Vistaprint to have a business card that actually states what I need out of the person that I'm handing it to? Right? And in lots of cases, it's equity. So you might say, do you say something like, I need your money? The answer is no. I am looking for like-minded, data-driven investors that are interested in cash flowing projects throughout the United States. Right? I'm interested in having a conversation with you about it. Something to that effect. You want to craft it yourself. You want it to represent who you are. And about virtual conferences? Well, that's even easier because you go to the Vistaprint website, you create the card, and then you just screenshot it. And then you use it throughout the conference. Now, this differentiates you from everybody else that's coming to the conference, because how many people are coming to conferences with virtual business cards? And the question is, why aren't they using virtual business cards? It differentiates them. Now, everybody remembers there was this one guy that had virtual business cards. Did you see that? That was very cool, right? He had this vertical card with a flashy logo and all those sorts of things. And he had actually written down what he wanted out of the conference, and he handed it out that way. So bottom line is, something as simple as a business card is about intention, catching people's attention, being different about the process that you follow, right? I'll give you a second example, and maybe this is because right before this, we started on this podcast, Steven and I agreed that I would teach a class about how to monetize a virtual meetup. So let's say you're going to a virtual meetup. How do you get like 10x the number of investors out of it? So I'll actually teach that as a class. So I'm not going to pick on virtual meetups, which are today's way of connecting. I'm going to talk about meetups because obviously I believe a vaccine will be found this year, and I believe it'll be administered next year. So the world will go back to meetups. So think about when you go to a meetup, right? A lot of people are like, I go to meetups to raise money. Okay, so the question that I ask you is, okay, so what are the steps you take to prepare to go to a meetup? Nobody ever answers that question. Okay. Mm-hmm. What are the specific things that you do when you go to that meetup? And these are the things you do every single time. Nobody answers it. What are the specific steps that you take when you return from the meetup that night? And what are the steps that you take next morning? Now, sometimes I get a decent answer on that. Sometimes from like 5% of the people. Now, you spend 6 hours of your life on one meetup, and you probably go to 10 of them in a year. So you spend 60 hours on an activity, but clearly you haven't spent 5 minutes on being intentional about that activity. What do I get out of it? And most importantly, the question that I ask people is, so if I had to look at your last 10 meetups that you attended, which of those were awesome? Which of those were horrible? Nobody knows the answer to that. Well, that's because you're not measuring each meetup. You don't actually have a measurement system for meetups, right? The same thing applies for everything, but I'll give you further examples of how I do meetups. So this is an example of intention. So when I pick meetups, I don't pick meetups at random. I pick meetups by going to the meetup website, looking at all of the different meetups, and then I pick meetups based on 2 criteria. Number one, how many people consistently attend that meetup? So I don't want to go to a meetup with 10 or 15 people. I want to go to a large meetup, right? As large as I possibly can. And most people don't know this. You can go to meetup and look at how many people registered for previous meetups. So you go back and you build a database of those, right? So you go into Excel and you build a database and you figure out which ones consistently had the highest number of people, registering for it. So that's one reason. There's a second reason, which is much more important, that I've never heard anybody say this. There are 2 kinds of meetups. One where you go in and a presenter presents and then you network. The second one where before a presenter presents, they allow you to do what is known as haves and wants, right? So this is a meetup where you get to stand up and for 30 to 60 seconds, say what you want to say. I only go to meetups that have haves and wants, because when I go to a haves and wants meetup, it makes me presenter for a minute. I am the presenter for 1 minute. For 60 seconds, no one else in this room talks. Everybody listens to me, right? That kind of meetup is 10 times more powerful